everyone. Welcome to our first ever episode for our college admissions podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be working with Brianna Dahl. Did I say that correctly? Or
Dolly, but otherwise you got
yeah,
it.
that works. Close enough. But I'm thrilled to work with her to discuss some tips and insight into how we can help you during this college admissions process. And today's episode, what are we talking about, Bri?
Today we're mostly going over just kind of the general college admissions basics on how to get started, what schedule to expect, like kind of how to plan out your next couple months of applying.
Perfect. So, how about do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll also give my own brief introduction as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Ishaan mentioned, my name's Brianna Dolly. I grew up in a really small town in Minnesota, but I now go to school at Vanderbilt University. I'm a sophomore, and I went through a very intense application process, so I'm really passionate about wanting to share that with you. And so that has put me in the position of GSE's VOT college admissions tutor and also a GSE board ambassador.
Perfect. Yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, I guess you could say I'm kind of, I won't say like the leader, but I am sort of the founder of this huge nonprofit group that we call GSE or the Global Social Enhancement Corp. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but I also studied at Vanderbilt during my from 2021 to 2024. And I double majored in molecular cellular biology and medicine, health, and society. And overall, my role here in GSE is I'm sort of involved in everything, to be realistic, but I definitely am invested in our VOT program. And our VOT program, for some context, has been it's been up since 2020. It's actually the oldest of our programs. And I think with our college admissions program, we definitely have a lot of great services we provide. Bree is on our college admissions tutoring side, and she can definitely assist you if you would like in terms of getting college admissions, further help on your college admit application for college admissions. So I guess we can sort of dig deep into the beginning of our episode. So I will just briefly cover some of the agenda items that we're going to cover. I know Bree kind of talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but we're talking about the different application platforms that we have that we will use that people use to apply to college, what necessary materials are needed for a college application, as well as the application method, timeline, and what you can do at this time to ensure that you are well prepared for the college admissions cycle. So without a further ado, could you tell us more about the application platforms, Bree?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the first steps to applying to a college is looking at which admissions platform you want to apply through. And looking at this process can kind of be a little bit intimidating because there are multiple of them and they all serve ever so slightly different functions. So, I'm just going to kind of give a little overview of just first of all, like what each platform is and what it can do for you. So in total, there's three main platforms, and then also some schools have a specific platform they want you to apply through the school. Most schools will let you apply through just these other general application platforms, and for the sake of time, I think it is really helpful to just mostly try to apply through these general application portals because when you apply through these, you can essentially type out a resume through different answer boxes and write a common essay. This is information that will carry over between all of your college applications when you apply to different schools. That way, you'll only have to resubmit essays. If you apply through the school-specific websites, you kind of get stuck having to retype out your resume each time through these little answer boxes. And that can take up a lot of time, especially if you're applying to multiple schools, which in general, most people are.
Yeah,
Um,
and oh, go ahead. Sorry. No,
oh, yeah.
I was just going to say really briefly that when it comes to the generic systems, the general application platforms and portals, I will say that when we look at these, you can definitely think about like it sort of is like you populate it once and it pre-populates it for a bunch of schools. Like on the back end, I will say I did work briefly in the Vanderbilt admissions office. I should have said in the introduction, but my point is that when it comes to these application platforms and portals, generally, as Bree mentioned, you want to go for just the three generic ones. It's good to sort of apply if you have the time to basically populate these three general platforms. So then you're kind of set for a bunch of schools. But as we also mentioned, there are some school systems like the UC system, which is kind of popular, Georgetown as well, and MIT. They're the three, I guess, schools that sort of use their own platform. But generally speaking, most schools use the three platforms. And I guess what are the three platforms?
Yeah. So we have Common App, Coalition, and QuestBridge. So essentially, Common App and Coalition are really the exact same application platform. There's very few differences. They are open to use by anybody. Essentially, what those consist of are a bunch of different slots for your activities. There's usually about 10 slots for activities. Well, Coalition has 8, Common App has 10 slots. There's 5 slots for significant awards recognitions. And when I say slots, I essentially mean like it's a spot for the name, a little description, and maybe the year you were involved in that. And then there's also a section where they'll ask for a common essay. Your common essay, I would say, is one of the backbones of your application. It is the one general essay that you submit to all schools. So for the Common App, this word count would be about 250 to 650 words, and the Coalition is 500 to 650 words. I would say one of the biggest differences between these two application platforms is that the Common App limits you to 20 schools, which honestly, I applied to way too many. I applied to 34 schools. I don't think anyone has to do that. I tried it, don't do it. The 20 spot limit is more than enough. So I wouldn't be worried about that limit. Coalition lets you do unlimited applications, but I would say fewer schools take Coalition. Almost everyone takes Common App.
Exactly.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think another quick thing I was just going to say briefly was like when it comes to the Common App in general, you do want to make sure that when you're looking at the different Common App essays, the common essay, as you mentioned, you do want to make sure that the prompts that you want to do your due diligence in terms of researching which prompt will work best for you. Because I can say on several occasions that there are some prompts that are a little bit misleadingly easy. I don't even, I can't even say if misleadingly is a word, but my point is there are some prompts that may look very tempting, but you want to be careful not to fall into following through with that prompt to the letter. Because, like, for example, one prompt that comes to my mind is share an essay that you wrote during your high school years. This is one of the prompts that I've seen before on the Common Essay, and I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen students who like kind of go for that prompt, but it's a prompt that is very nuanced on the back end, and it's something that if you were to choose that prompt, it has to be really stellar as a whole. So I think one thing I would just recommend is definitely you want to do your due diligence in researching which essay prompt works the best for you. And then from that point forward, just move in terms of like fulfilling the the onus of the prompt, but also making sure that you have a really nice, well-crafted story, which we're going to go into the essays in a bit more detail in another future episode. But definitely, I just wanted to push that in there that it's good to look into essay prompts as well for both your common essay as well as your coalition essay as well. Just want to
Yes, and also with that, most essay prompts stay consistent from year to year. It's very rare that I'll see one change. And if I do see it change, it's usually minor enough that if you are already having an idea in your head, you can still use that same idea. So even if you want to look at essay prompts before the application cycle is open, that's absolutely possible.
yeah. All right. So I guess we can move to the next portal, which is QuestBridge, and I'll kind of go over this one. So obviously, who can apply to QuestBridge? Any students who attend high school in the US, US citizens, US permanent residents living abroad. I will say though, there are some things changing these days with how our in the mod this is being filmed in 2026 in January, so there's always changes happening, so it's always good to stay up to date. But at this time, US citizens, US permanent residents living abroad, not international students, but again, permanent US permanent residents living abroad, those who demonstrate a strong academic ability, those who have a relatively high GPA, but there's no specific cutoff in general. And another big condition is that your household has to earn less than $65,000 annually with minimal assets. And Bree, how does QuestBridge typically work? by the way.
Yeah. So QuestBridge gives you a not necessarily advantage, but another route for applications. Whereas typically you could apply through a couple different routes, which is like early decision, which we'll get into all of these soon. There's a lot of terms that will be flying around, but there's
Right.
typically you'll go into a general application pool, you'll apply, you'll get responses, and then you get to pick from there what college you're accepted into or which college you admit to. With QuestBridge, you can apply, you can rank your top schools, and then you'll apply through the earliest application cycle, essentially. And with that, the benefit is that the admissions officers have not seen any of the other applicants. You're also being accepted through a much smaller pool. And QuestBridge does a really good job of making sure that the colleges are informed of your situation as well, to understand that when you're in a living situation where your family isn't making a very high income, you might not have as much time to do extracurriculars, or your grades might end up falling because you have other family or work commitments. So that kind of gives a better understanding of your wider picture to the admissions office. With that, though, you will be accepted into a match program. If you're accepted into the match program, from there, you can be matched with a top one of your top schools. So out of your rankings, if you get accepted in the match program, you'll be automatically admitted to one of those schools if they accept you, which usually the likelihood of that is pretty high if you make it into the match program. If you do not get accepted into the match program, then you are sent back through the regular application cycle where then you don't necessarily have the same benefits as QuestBridge, but you still are eligible to apply and be accepted into those same top schools that you like.
And certainly, I will say that one big thing with QuestBridge is that in terms of like the interface and logistics of QuestBridge, a lot of it is similar to like the Common App and Coalition app. And when it comes to perks and drawbacks of QuestBridge, some key perks are that your application fees are typically waived, and you also have additional support available during the application and the transition process. And it's a big source of financial aid as well. Uh,
Yes.
yes. And do you have anything else you want to add for perks?
I was just gonna say, I did realize I totally forgot to say the biggest benefit of QuestBridge is when you are matched with a school and you're admitted to that school, you receive a full ride.
That is very important. So yes.
Definitely. I completely forgot about that aspect.
No, it's all perfect. And I mean, and the only thing that we do want to mention though when it comes to QuestBridge, however, is that only some of the most top universities are actually partnered with the National College Match. So it is still likely that you will have to apply to other schools through other application platforms throughout the cycle, but and preferably earlier if you can. But generally speaking, we do have like, I mean, I can say I think Vanderbilt is one of the few schools for a fact that does participate in the National College Match for Quest.
Yeah.
So,
Well, one
yeah.
of my roommates is a QuestBridge scholar, and she said it was a very good decision for her.
So we definitely have. So I think we can move forward with the next class of application platforms. So this is, I'll talk about the school specific platforms really briefly. It's really, these platforms are more like, as I said, Georgetown, MIT, and the UC system. Like they're the big, I guess, schools that generally have their own platforms. And with the UC system, it's a whole network of colleges. So it doesn't even matter if you're applying to UCLA or UC Berkeley, you're still applying to the UC system. So, but you can, of course, indicate which colleges you would like to attend, and then you kind of move from there. But again, when it comes to applying to a university, it's helpful to look at what platforms do they accept applications through. So many colleges will say explicitly that we use the Common App, or we use the Coalition app, or we use our own app. So that's definitely something you have to keep in mind and do your due diligence when it comes to research. Um, and as we already said before, like almost all the schools accept Common App. There is still, I think, a few schools do accept Coalition exclusively, but there's a lot of schools that do Common App and Coalition App as well. So I will say, like, one of the exclusive Coalition App schools is University of Washington in Seattle. They're one of the few that just used Coalition. But again, as I said, both there's a lot of schools that use both Common and Coalition, with most preferably using Common. And then there's, of course, many of the top universities use QuestBridge. And then I kind of already went into a few examples as to which schools use their own platforms as well. And generally, using a general platform saves time. And as Bree mentioned before, if you sort of apply to them individually with their own platforms, it takes a lot of time. And time is of the essence when it comes to this process, as we can both attest.
Most definitely.
So, all right, I guess we can move forward. So, what materials do we need typically for a college application?
Yeah, so in general, I applied a couple years ago, so some of this info might have changed, or they might be asking for more or less. So it might change year to year, but this is kind of the general what they'll ask for. Typically, they want to know just general identity, demographics. Some of this they may or may not be collecting with recent legislature. Typically, if they do collect it now, this under this government, it will not affect your acceptance. And a lot of it's also optional. Some of it they just collect for admittance data, and some of it they need to know how to contact you. Like they want your name, your email, very basic information like about where you live is usually the only stuff they require. They want to know your awards and recognitions. They want to know what you've done and what you've achieved in life. And they also want to know what you're involved in. So that when I say that, that's a very general thing. That can be extracurriculars, service, job experience, but they even want to know if you have large family commitments. Like for a period of my life, I was a caretaker for one of my relatives. That was something I wanted to put on my application because it was a large chunk of my devoted time. And so even stuff like that, family commitments, they do want to know about whether that be in your activities section or also there's an additional information section where you can list other extenuating circumstances. They will also want your general essay, which we've discussed as well.
And also when it comes to letters of recommendation, there are usually 2 to 3 letters of recommendation that many schools recommend. I'm not sure if there's a limit, so that is something that you should definitely check to see if your college has a certain like preferred, like if they want science, preferably we can go into more detail about letters of recommendation, but definitely it's something that you want to check with your college to see like what do they typically like to see. Many schools in the country here are like liberal arts colleges, so obviously you want to have a good spread when it comes to your letters of recommendation. But again, we'll discuss that more in detail in another episode. I did want to briefly mention that when it comes to letters of recommendation, there's also sometimes your school might have a counselor who writes a letter of recommendation. So this is true for like in my case, like I remember that my high school counselor wrote a letter of recommendation. And it was sort of like a committee letter package. So it's sort of a package of letters that are sent to your college the colleges that you apply to. But certainly that is something, again, that's a very tentative thing. So you definitely want to check with your school and you want to check with your college. That's sort of the underlying theme here. But I will
Yeah.
also say really briefly, when it comes to your identity information and demographics, I think one of the big questions that does sometimes come up is like your parents' educational background. And sometimes financial status is also asked about. So those are just some pieces of information good to have on your, I guess, just good to have on your side, just so that you can complete those sections more quickly. But other than that, there's also a supplemental section to your college application. So, generally speaking, a lot of what we've discussed to this point has been a general application. So, you're listing, again, achievements, awards, your extracurricular activities, all these things are sort of being sent to every school that you apply to. However, every school often tends to have a supplemental application. So this supplemental section is more personalized to the school itself. And there are specific essay prompts that are given by the college you're applying to, and some schools even require interviews. I can say that many of the Ivy Leagues and your top tier universities, oftentimes they offer interviews, and sometimes these interviews are optional or they're mandatory. And I can say for a fact, like with Harvard, Cornell, these are some schools that sort of mandate that you do an interview with them.
Mhm.
So often the best thing is just to keep checking on the school application portal because sometimes after you complete your Common App and the supplemental section, the schools often send you a portal where you can sort of monitor your status in terms of where you are in the application process. So the best thing is just to keep an eye and see what the school wants, and you then just subsequently provide them the information that they need. And then lastly, just to kind of cover this as well, there are some additional essays in the supplemental section where you can apply for school-specific scholarships. And like I know with Vanderbilt, as our since that's sort of our collective alumni here. Well, you're still a student, I'm an alumni, but my point is that with the Vanderbilt, like there are some scholarships, like the Cornelius Vanderbilt scholarship, and there's a bunch of other things that, for example, we every school has some options when it comes to applying for their own scholarships, merit-based or need-based sometimes too. So
I
yeah,
will note with that, I'm actually a Cornelius Vanderbilt scholar.
there we go.
Some schools like to hide their scholarships. Um, by that I mean they're not always in your portal. I know specifically, I don't think the Cornelius Vanderbilt one is mentioned in the portal, so you have to apply for it like separately. So just when you apply to a school, always make sure to Google like merit-based scholarships because sometimes they have some that have their own separate application.
Yeah, and I guess the big thing is you always want to do your due diligence in terms of research for the schools and colleges you're applying to so that you definitely know what components are or like what components you want to make use of or what components you need to submit so that you can avail the most out of your college application as a whole. So I guess we can move to the next step, which is the application methods. So we've talked a little bit about the first one, but the National College Match, which is really through QuestBridge, where you have low-income students applying through QuestBridge, and a match entails a full commitment to the university with a four-year scholarship provided. And in theory, this is the earliest application decision cycle that you get. But what else is there, Bree, by the way?
After this, we kind of get into all of the complex terminology used by college admissions. And it's also annoyingly not consistent from school to school. So, just to preface before I get into the nitty-gritty, again, researching what application methods your school has is really important. And if you're confused by that, because there's a lot of different terminology schools use, and there's a lot of different rules schools use, um, please feel free to email us. I'll give my email at the end of this podcast. And if
Mhm.
you have any questions or just want something defined, I'm happy to help with that. So we get into the first one is early decision. This is the second earliest application cycle relative to National College Match. So if you're not doing National College Match or you're not eligible for it, this is your earliest application cycle. This means your essay and all of your other requirements have to be submitted at the earliest deadline. With that, if you apply early decision and you are accepted, you are automatically enrolled in that school. You're committed as soon as you apply, if you get in, essentially. If you don't get in, you're deferred, which essentially means you're just going to be reconsidered through the regular application portal. So if you don't get admitted through early decision, you do still have the chance to be accepted to that school, but you're no longer tied to it if you're admitted. So the biggest thing with early decision is you want to be 100% certain that that is a school you would want to go to if accepted. There's no other schools you'd rather go to. Typically, some schools, not all schools, will split that into ED1 and ED2. That basically means it's like a top choice school and a second choice school. Most schools will offer ED1, not all schools offer ED2. How that works is if you're not accepted to your ED1 school, but you are accepted to your ED2 school, then you're automatically enrolled in your ED2 school. So it's really complicated. I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, again, like I'll give my email. Please feel free to reach out. With that, the other thing is you can only apply to one early decision school. If you apply to multiple, that is against the rules, and you could get stuck in a really sticky situation where you're not accepted anywhere. So make sure if you're applying early decision, it's to one school and it's to your top choice.
And really briefly, I will say that I mean, it's unlikely, as we said, but if you do somehow like there is a letter where you have to sign off when it comes to early decisions. So if you choose to go with the early decision path for a specific college, it's a letter and it gets sent to like your Common App or it's basically available for all your colleges to see. So that's why when we say Don't think about trying to do ED at multiple places. It's definitely something that to live by because that documentation, once you sign off on that letter that you are applying ED to this specific college, it's sort of there for everyone to see. Just to
Mhm.
say something on the back end. I will say that that is something that some people have tried in the past. Definitely not something that we recommend at all. And then I think I just wanted to add in one really brief point here is that with early decision, it of course it is very much binding, and you definitely want to make sure that you're feeling very comfortable with the school that you're applying to. I recommend personally that to also look at tours as well, because many colleges offer tours. So if you are doing an ED decision for a specific school, I would definitely recommend that you have done your due diligence. So that includes, this is something personal advice, I guess you could say, is to definitely do your tours, definitely make sure that this is the school for you. You want to make sure that that is very much true all the way when you're applying with this path. And then finally, I know Bree, I did want to briefly add in here that if you do guys, if you all did, yeah, sorry, my bad there. If you all have any questions, definitely we actually have consultation based appointments. So definitely there's a really short, but if you want to talk more about this sort of process or any of the terminology we're discussing in this episode, that's also one avenue which we will certainly link at the bottom or at the end of this podcast episode. There we go. Sorry, continue, please. Yeah, so we were
Oh,
moving
yeah.
on to so we talked about early decision. I guess we can move on to the next method, which is early action. So do you want me to take this one, or would you like to do?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So early action is basically not binding. That's the first thing. Early action and early decision, a lot of the times people feel that they can get confused by the two, but early decision is binding, early action is not. And some schools offer an early application deadline, really, that results in an earlier decision being conveyed. And oftentimes this is the early action. This is the early action statement, and it does not bind you, as I said. And schools have varying policies in terms of whether you can apply early decision to one university and early action to another. So again, the big thing is research your colleges that you have on your school list and definitely make sure that you are in the rules when it comes to like either applying early decision for one college and early action for a few others. You're always subject to deferral, even with early action. So let's say if you choose, if the college decides to defer you, you're again placed back into the regular decision pool and they will then make a decision from there. And deferral is nothing but just a waiting period, essentially. So it's not that you've been rejected, it's just we need some more time to consider you for your application before we let you in or we don't let you in. So it's just more time, basically. And oftentimes, early action does lead to a boost in application success because there's a smaller application pool. And you could say that I mean, practically and logistically, you can also think about the admissions officers, since you're sort of at the top of the heap, they can review your application more thoroughly. And with less applicants, it's certainly, and a lot of seats, you do stand a bit of a higher chance of getting in. But of course, as we said, I mean, all the outcomes are possible. So either
Mhm.
acceptance or a deferral, but either way, we can always look at that in more detail. Bree, would you like to tell us about regular decision? Chance.
Absolutely. So regular decision is what you either apply to just normally without early decision or early action, or it's the pool you get deferred into, as we talked about. This is just the general, like, where the pool that everyone gets considered. It has the latest deadline for application. Usually we'll get to deadlines later, but it's usually sometime in like late December or January-ish. But typically, this is the pool where basically anyone who is deferred from early decision, early action, if the school offers it, and everyone else applying to the university applies to. This doesn't have any sort of application boost as it's just the regular pool. You're on the same playing field as everybody. And with regular decision, that is a final say whether you're in or out when you get the application decision, but there is also a chance to be waitlisted, which is essentially saying we are full and but we would still consider you if spots open up. So if you are waitlisted, there's still a chance you'll get in, but with recent application totals and some of these recent, like past couple of years, having the most applications on record, I was waitlisted at a couple of schools and all of them said they were still full and still fully at capacity. So they could not offer any seats on the wait list.
Yeah, so definitely you do want to make sure that you are, I mean, again, and we'll get to this later as well, but like when it comes to college lists and college, like the number of colleges you apply to, you definitely want to keep yourself in a safety net for sure, so that you at least have somewhere to go for college, ideally. So definitely, this is something we'll discuss more, but when it comes to wait lists and all, like again, never be disheartened. It's just the process, and it's something that if you prepare yourself well in the beginning, you'll definitely be fine. At least the goal is to get into one college. Remember that at the end of the day. So, anyways, we can move a little bit into the timeline for general like applications. So most applications, I think all of them, my bad, open on August 1st, and then early action, early decision typically varies around mid-October to early November. And if schools offer early decision twice, so like early decision one and early decision two, we're talking about early decision one in this case. So early action and early decision slash early decision one is basically what we're talking about. Most of these applications are due between mid-October and early November. Then the decision letters are often released in December, and regular decision applications are due typically in January or early February, and sometimes early decision two is also in this time frame as well. And regular decision admissions letters are typically released in March to April. And then there are some schools that even do rolling admissions. So I think one of these schools, if I'm not wrong, they may have changed now, but I know when I was applying, Penn State is one of the schools that
Mhm.
actually does rolling admissions. So what that means essentially is if you apply earlier in the overall application cycle, you'll get a decision pretty quickly as well. And similarly, if you apply late in the cycle, like you'll get a decision a little bit later, like near the end. So it's a very dynamic process, and there's no fixed deadlines per se when it comes to
Mhm.
rolling admissions, but you definitely want to be on the earlier heap for rolling admissions. And then generally speaking, commitment day is May 1st. So this is the day you will declare the college you're attending to. And of course, for those applicants for early decision, this has already been done theoretically because you signed that binding agreement. So you kind of have to already declare, like, I think you're given a deadline to within I don't know if this is still true, but within 2 weeks, you're supposed to basically say that, fulfill the enrollment steps. So for early
Mhm.
decision people, it's a little bit earlier, but for regular decision, generally, May 1st is your formal commitment day for your non-binding applicants. All right. Could you tell us a little bit about the QuestBridge application timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So the QuestBridge application timeline is very set for year to year. So I'm going to give the specific rundown for the dates this year, which have just passed, but they will give you a general idea of when things will be happening next year. Um, if you are applying in next year's application cycle or years down the line, hopefully if people are still watching this, um, the dates will be specific to that year and can be very easily accessed on the QuestBridge website. But again, the timeline I'm about to give is specific for 2025 to 2026. All of these dates have passed, so we don't have to worry about that. But applications typically open in the late summer. The National College Match applications are due September 30th. So again, very early. So if you are applying through QuestBridge, make sure you start your planning process much earlier than the general application pool. Match rankings open October 1st. This is when you sit down and you decide what your top schools are. So again, you probably are also going to want to start touring earlier than other students. If you can't tour, there's also online tours, which I found to be less helpful, but still did give me a good picture of the school if I'm on a time crunch or if the school's in a farther away state. Your match ranking is due October 16th. Finalist decisions for the National College Match are released, sorry, October 21st. This essentially says whether or not you're in the match, not matched with the school, but whether you're eligible to be matched with the school. If you do not get into this match program, then you're just applying through the general application timeline again. Additional finalist materials are due November 1st. This is like the materials for your school specific applications. Regular decision opens November 4th for anyone who did not get college match as well. Match decisions are released December 1st, so this is when you're told what school you're going to. And again, if you were not in that match program, your regular decision deadline, just saying that you're doing regular decision, is due December 11th. And additional regular decision materials, decision release dates, and commitment dates are the same in the regular decision pool. So essentially, there's two tracks you can end up in. You can end up continuing on the National College Match track with some of those earlier deadlines that can be found on the QuestBridge website, or you're going to go, if you do not get into the college match program, through the regular decision applicants, just with the same timeline we just discussed.
Perfect. And I think, I guess now to sort of look at this at a more macro scale when it comes to applying for college. So generally speaking, you want to start beginning your college search. So obviously everybody has a different criteria as to how they want their college experience to look like, but definitely you want to look at majors, programs that are available at the school. Oftentimes I will say that if you do this step nicely, you actually kind of get some ammunition for your essays. Like one of your essays can be your why us essay, which is like, why do you want to attend our college? So if you do your research well, for your college search, then oftentimes you sort of have already identified like what is interesting you to attend that particular college. So obviously look at majors, programs, location, student body, size. Sometimes ratios are helpful, like student to faculty ratios or something that people look at. And definitely you want to make sure that this is all very organized as well. So have a spreadsheet or a document available where you're sort of documenting your, I guess, the aspects that really intrigue you in terms of attending your specific college. And of course, I would say the same spreadsheet could even be used to keep track of deadlines. So obviously, we talked about so many deadlines, so many different processes and steps, and you definitely want to make sure that every step of the way you have a some form of way to make sure that you're on track or in track. I guess I don't know if that works, but you kind of get what I'm saying there. And then of course, I would say to always look at detailed information like college admission statistics, acceptable SAT, ACT ranges as well, desirable GPA. One resource that I know I've used before, but it's called Naviance. It's basically a resource where you're sort of able to sort of get all this information in one place. So when we talked about SAT ranges, GPAs, and then the statistics of people who got in, it sort of is a nice resource where you can see all of that. And a lot of schools actually I've heard actually have Naviance. So check if your high school has it. Many schools I know do, but if your school doesn't, it's not a big deal. You can always find this information publicly. So all these
Mhm.
colleges, I will say, the one thing that's nice is that many colleges report like what their desirable SAT, ACT range is. Even a simple Google search will give you all this information. So, um, and of course, if you don't have like organized tools like Naviance, you can always make your own resource and sort of document and list the criteria of every school and move from
Mhm.
there. Um, do you want to talk? I know you talked a little bit about touring. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about touring?
Absolutely. I was like a hardcore tourer of all these schools because both of my parents, the tradition in Minnesota is to pretty much stay in Minnesota. So being from a small town there, everyone I talked to only went to school in Minnesota, and I wanted to go to school out of state. So it was a very new process, and I did not know what to expect at all. So I toured like everywhere basically. Don't recommend doing that. It's very, very time consuming and gets very expensive very fast. So I think what's best is to first sit down, and I made a mega spreadsheet of all of the things that I want in a school. And I went through and I researched, and that allowed me to kind of narrow my window of here's what I want. It also taught me a bit about what I want too, so I could go into touring with a bit more of a set mind saying, these are this is what I'm looking for essentially, rather than going in blind and just kind of looking at the school and the pretty buildings. Um, so I made sure I spent some time on thinking about what I want, looking into these schools, seeing if they even have the program I want. I kind of wanted a very specific program, being someone who is pre-med, but I'm also studying theater. So I wanted to make sure I could find a school where I could do both. And that was one of my biggest criteria. If the school didn't support that, I wasn't going to tour them because that was what I knew I wanted to do. There were some schools, though, that surprised me upon touring that I did not expect to like, that I ended up really loving. So I do think, even though you can come in with this fixed mindset, I do think a level of open-mindedness is really important. I mean, I did not want to go to Vanderbilt at all. I toured it and I ended up loving it. So I think that's the other thing is online, schools can look very different from what they look like in person. So I think finding connections, if you can speak to a person who goes to that school, that's important. If you're not able to tour it, you can look at what students have talked about online. You can find online tours, but otherwise trying to find schools that you could tour in person is always going to get you the best picture of the school. But again, narrowing that window so you can save a little bit of money is also very important.
Yes. And I think when it comes to touring as well, as you mentioned, like there is a difference between online tours and in-person tours. I think with online tours, you sort of get an image as to what you can expect if you were to do an in-person tour. But of course, when you do an in-person tour, there is a new level of engagement in the sense that you kind of can engage with current students who attend the school. I think I know with Vanderbilt, I'm just going to use that as our key example at this time, but they actually tend to they do tours year round. And oftentimes, like, I think there's some occasions where you can actually speak to the students in these who lead these tours, and they can definitely tell you more about like what they enjoy about the school, what drew them into the school, that, why are they here basically. So there are some advantages to an in-person tour for sure. But of course, if you're cut on time and you're also somewhat economically constrained, definitely you should think about an online tour at minimum if you can, because almost all schools in the country offer an online tour at this stage. But obviously, in-person tour is preferable, but everybody has their own circumstances when it comes to those.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah.
Also, I was going to say with some schools, um, if you email the admissions office, not all schools do this, but some schools, if you email the admissions office and explain that you can't tour and just ask to be connected with a student to maybe discuss what life like's there, a lot of times you will be able to be connected with somebody.
So, and there is, I mean, another thing that we will say that we have a lot to discuss, and definitely in future episodes we're going to be covering these topics in much more detail. And of course, depending on reception of this episode, we might cover, like, while we do have a schedule of topics that we want to cover, if there are additional topics that seem to be very interesting or intriguing, then definitely like we can cover those as well in like additional episodes if necessary. I think we can move forward a little bit with like our application materials and some
Mhm.
tips and insights that we would give. Definitely one thing I would say for sure is you want to begin your essays as soon as possible. So essays are the one thing I will say that you want to spend a good amount of time. So you want to definitely think of a good story if you have one, and you just want to definitely take some time to brainstorm, write the essay, and of course, proofread. Because I will say the countless number of times when there have been people who rush their essays, you can definitely tell the difference between a rushed essay and somebody who took their time and thought out very meticulously every single detail of their essay. So you definitely want to be very well prepared in this regard for sure. And essays, I will say, is a huge component when it comes to determining whether an applicant comes into a college or not. And it's definitely something you want to not take lightly. Everything else might be metrics, like GPA is a metric, your SAT, ACT is a metric, but essays are the one place where you can truly highlight yourself. And you definitely want to make sure that you put your heart into this so that you definitely ensure that every admissions officer who is reading your application in terms of your essays they can kind of get an idea of who you are without actually having met you. And then that's the first big thing. And then the second big thing I would say is definitely you want to request your letter of recommendations as soon as possible. So we'll get into this as well a little bit more into like who you should ask for a letter of recommendation. But it's obviously recommended that you give enough time for your letter writers so that they can also craft very well written and thoughtful letters that'll help you in the application cycle. Um, and then when it comes to interviews as well, if you're given the opportunity to interview or if you have choices, you definitely want to interview earlier in the application cycle because I mean, it kind of comes back to this basic idea that as time goes on, more and more people are applying. And if you're at the earlier in the heap, then you definitely have a higher chance. That's just sort of the underlying logic here when it comes to interviews, or I personally would say that's true for the whole application cycle. I mean, you could say that the earlier you are, the better chances you might have. And then, of course, while we did talk about the essays being very well written and thoughtful, you also want to make sure that your awards and your extracurricular activity sections are as thoughtful as the essays. And you also want to try to minimize overlap if you can. That's another thing that I will say that you don't want admissions officers to read the same exact information. So definitely you want to make sure that your awards and activity sections are very well written and precise and concise because those while we did talk about those word limits, trust me, those limits really strike hard because there's so much information you want to convey, but very limited space for you to actually do so. Did you want to add anything, Bree, by chance, for the essay
Yeah,
or
I
anything?
was just gonna say, in addition, making sure you update those activity sections. Even though you fill it in once, those sections, not to the schools you've already applied to, but to the schools you're still planning on applying to and have not submitted to yet, the activity section can be updated. If you receive an award maybe towards the end of the application cycle and you want to report that to the last couple of schools you're applying to, absolutely feel free to update that section as more information comes to you.
So, yeah, and so that's definitely, and then I guess we can sort of end since I know we're sort of reaching our episode time here. What can our listeners do right now, actually?
Yeah, I think the absolute biggest thing to start doing, no matter what grade level you are in high school, is to start thinking about what you want in a college. I know it feels very early to start thinking about like what you want to do long term, but even just starting the search of what do I value even in just student body, like who do I want to surround myself with? What programs might I want to look into? Where might I want to live? Like what state do I want to go to? Just starting to gather kind of your own personal idea of what I want in a college, but then also starting to maybe even start keeping a spreadsheet or a document with all of that information and the criteria that you found so far. Like something that I started doing probably sophomore year of high school is if I went to a certain state, I'd try to tour a college that I was interested in there. This wasn't like a dedicated, like I'm going there to tour a college. This was like I was visiting my grandpa and there was a college nearby that I wanted to look at. Even doing that early on can still give you an idea of what do I want and what do I not want.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's definitely applicable. I mean, sometimes if you're lucky, if you're in the area, it doesn't harm to look at a college or two when you're there because I mean, you never know, like you again sort of get a feel of the environment that's at the college. And of course, you sort of want to, as Bree mentioned, you want to make sure that you are definitely thinking about what you value in a school. Regardless, like I can say as I mean, even though I didn't apply there, but I actually toured Stanford since I have family in San Francisco. So it's like you kind of, I mean, you kind of get a feel for the colleges that you want to go to. Like you may not go to those colleges in the long run, but you definitely want to do your research, as Bree mentioned, when it comes to determining your eventual college list. And I would also say, like, at the same time, especially this is more true for your sophomores and your juniors, especially, you want to also start looking at like SAT, ACT in terms of like, obviously, you want to sort the schools that you're looking at into different categories. So typically, you have three big categories. You have reach schools, you have target schools, and you have safety schools. Oftentimes, Again, as you're compiling like school metrics. So like as you're looking at like, for example, like one college might have a range of SAT between 1560 and 1600, for example. So like you want to, as you're making that list and tally as to like what colleges are having specific metrics, you definitely want to make sure that you can then classify that school once you get your own SAT or ACT and your own GPA, and then see where you kind of land in terms of your chances of acceptance. Because as the names sort of imply, reach schools are sort of harder to get into, like your existing metrics, so your existing GPA and SAT, ACT, it isn't necessarily what's preferable, but there is a small chance you could get in. Target schools are, it's more of like a match, you could say, like you're sort of in the middle. In terms of the ranges that they look at for applicants. And then safety, as you're well above the range for GPA and SAT, ACT. So that's sort of a breakdown of terminology there. But you definitely want to start classifying colleges, but through these three criteria when you're starting to develop your list. And then, of course, setting timeline goals. You want to make sure that you're working through your application in a very timely manner. And of course, as we've mentioned previously in the episode, setting up a spreadsheet or some system where you can sort of track where you are in the process and make sure that you have all the necessary materials in time before you apply or during the application cycle. Like you want to make sure everything's being sent on time or in time. And then, of course, gathering, like when it comes to the activities and the awards and those sections, you definitely want to make sure that you have sort of a document. This is, I mean, you can start the process of gathering all these activities, like what you want to put on your application. You can at least start the process of gathering them all onto one place in a list format. And then, of course, beginning your common essay as prompts as well. So, like looking into the different prompts that are available on the Common App or on the Coalition app, or even the school specific portals. Some of them sort of publish their essays as well. And you sort of then just sort of get an idea as to what questions you need to answer and like how you want to answer them. And that too is something you can start to prepare for, at least in the beginning. Of course, strengthening your application, I guess, do you have any insights or tips for our listeners today?
Yeah, I think no matter where you're at in your high school career, even if like you're starting applications or you're still like a freshman, sophomore, I think it's really good to make sure you're getting involved with stuff that you're really passionate about. Um, Schools look less at how many activities you do and how many, like, look less at that and look more at how deeply you're involved in them. So finding leadership positions to take on, even if you don't feel like you'd be fit in a leadership position, I recommend trying it out. I did not want to do anything competitive, anything leadership based. In early high school, I was very intimidated by it, but then I started doing it and I found myself in a leadership position, I think all of my activities. So try stuff. And if you don't like it, don't feel pressured to continue it. But and if you feel pressured to move away from that, move into something else. Find something that does light up that spark inside of you and take up a higher position in it, or go the extra mile to start a service project or another project of some sort that you're really deeply passionate about. So
And
just, yeah, start stuff.
And I will say, like, as a fun fact about VOT as a whole, it actually started off as a service passion project during the pandemic. It later evolved into something bigger, which, I mean, that was not foreseen, but I'm very grateful that that happened. But either way, like, kind of have to take that initiative in many ways. Like, if you do choose to do a service project or a passion project or a leadership position, you definitely want to take initiative in those positions so that you can really communicate your desire to make a positive change and also to show like why you really deserve this spot in this college that you're applying to. And I would say as one additional tip is like actions often speak louder than words. So the more you demonstrate in the form of like doing projects or things, that shows that you actually truly have a willingness to make positive change in the community. Or, of course, I'm talking in the community service aspect, but even as a leadership position, if you take initiatives to lead different initiatives, you obviously are exemplifying that leadership, and that is very powerful as a whole. And I did also want to briefly mention that, like, when it comes to, like, of course, we talk so much about passion projects and leadership positions, but you obviously also, there's no harm in also trying to, I kind of forgot where I was going with this. I'll be real with you. But anyways, but I mean, I guess my point is that you definitely want to exemplify depth in your projects rather than breadth. That's where I was going.
Hmm. For
So like
sure.
depth is more preferable than breadth, which is scope of projects. So you definitely want to um, take that into consideration as you're engaging in activities in high school. Sorry, I'll let you finish up real quick.
Yeah. I think the last thing that I would like to add as well is as you're starting this process, or whether you're deep in this process, the biggest thing to remember is that you will end up somewhere that is right for you, and to not be intimidated by the statistics that these colleges post, to not be intimidated by your own stats, to just trust that you will end up somewhere that you're going to feel at home. And if that doesn't happen, of course, there's other routes, other options that you can follow that will get you to the place you would like to be.
So yeah. And finally, I think we'll just sort of conclude here and just sort of bring our own role into this. So certainly, we would recommend that if you want to learn more about how, like, if you want to gain assistance throughout this process and guidance, of course, Bree and I, we work very closely on this project, which is assisting students through the college admissions process. And I do want to emphasize that our sessions, our consultation sessions and everything, they're free. So you don't have to worry about paying any sum or fee that a lot of other places require you to do so. We are here to assist you at the end of the day, and of course give the chance to people who at this time, like, they may not be as, like, whether you're a first generation college student, like nobody else in your family has attended college, or if you're really just sort of very new to this process. Both Bree and I, we lead a college admissions. Can't think of the word right now, but college admissions program. There we go. Where we sort of work together in assisting students, and we actually, at the end of this video, or at the end of this episode, I should say, we are actually going to attach a video where we're going to, like, that's another thing we will discuss as to how you can schedule those consultation sessions. But that is something that is available for both of us. And I think that is pretty much it. And then, yeah, so I guess we will see you all in our next episode for the college admissions podcast. We call this the College Admissions Tips to Success podcast, but I guess the abbreviated way we could say is the College Admissions podcast. And we look forward to seeing you all in our next episode.
And
So,
thank you all, and best of luck.
Welcome to GSE. We are glad that you have chosen us to best assist you in your academic needs. This video will cover the steps to set up a one-on-one virtual tutoring session with one of our skilled tutors. First, start by visiting the GSE website, thegsecorp.org. Next, scroll down and click on the Learn More button under the VOT Institute panel. Clicking the Learn More button will direct you to the virtual outreach tutoring page on our website. Upon reaching this page, scroll down and click on the Students button. You will now be directed to complete the one-on-one student registration form. If you have a preference to get assistance from a specific tutor, please click the Our Tutor Team button to see a list of our different tutors and their respective academic specialties. Near the end of the one-on-one student registration form, you will be asked to set up an appointment with a virtual tutor. When you click the Schedule the Appointment link, you will be directed to a scheduling page where you will set up an appointment with a tutor. Do not close the student registration form. After setting up your appointment, you will need to return to the student registration form and click the Confirm option button to show that you have scheduled your appointment. Finally, submit the student registration form and check your email for confirmation. Congratulations! You have successfully set up your virtual tutoring session. If you encounter any difficulties throughout this process, please do not hesitate to contact the GSE Technical Helpline at 516-331-1606 or send an email to us at tutors@thegsecorp.org.